Thanks so much for joining us for this Tuesday's edition of Alaska Weather on the second day of November 2021. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first, no watches, warnings, or advisories out anywhere around the state. Southern Alaska up to the north to the Arctic coast, northern Bering Sea, southern Bering Aleutians, all watch advisory and warning free for the next day or so. Moving from there onto satellite imagery, you see low pressure tracking northward or northwestward into the Gulf of Alaska from the southeast there, and that bringing some pretty good winds, gusting 45 to 50 miles an hour Middleton Island during the afternoon hours. They picked up about half an inch of precipitation, as well as Valdez also had roughly half an inch of rain, and Alyeska, Mount Alyeska, had half an inch of precipitation too, as did Talkeetna. Otherwise, a little less or around an inch of snow fell in the Fairbanks area. Same thing at Nome there. Several surges of moisture tracking northward there along the west coast, and each one of those a little wave, and one scooting north through the Bering Strait brought winds gusting to 62 miles an hour at Tin City for a peak wind gust there today. Otherwise, around 40 miles an hour in gusts from the east-southeast, Kotzebue, and along the northwest coast there at Point Hope. Had gusts to about 46 miles per hour. Otherwise, lighter winds, some clearing over the central Aleutians today, but surges of moisture again, another mass coming across the Alaska Peninsula. And then that band of clouds in the central interior, some areas of light snow, very light with that, again drifting westward, but streaming northward there, and kind of unsettled over the Panhandle. About a tenth of an inch of rain fell at Ketchikan. That was one of the heavier amounts. Some areas didn't see anything at all, but a lot of clouds down that way today. On the chart, you can see the rain in over the southeast coast, nothing heavy. Just light on the light side, Ketchikan, 12-hour amount, as I mentioned, about a tenth of an inch. And over the interior, areas of light snow with the moisture spreading northward, streaming northward, and gradually westward there. And then back to the west there, that low center near the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, bringing a little bit of light precipitation there. We'll see for tonight. That low kicks eastward there into Bristol Bay. The other one hangs near the Bering Strait, and then a much weaker one up over the northeast interior, eastern Brooks Range, and weak low pressure in the Gulf of Alaska. That low begins to slow down and starts to weaken. The front hangs up along the coast of the Panhandle just off the North Gulf Coast. It'll be kind of breezy with that frontal boundary tonight for the North Gulf Coast there down off the north coast of the Panhandle. And gusty winds continue for the eastern Aleutians. Cold air continues to move southward over the central and eastern Bering Sea. Now continue to drop. Snowfall levels will come back down towards sea level. So look for the precipitation to mix with snow for the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutian areas. Definitely for the Pribilofs, and extending back up, just some light snow flurries possibly, or some snow shower activity for the southwest coast to the Bering Strait. Winds will be much lighter up there, and maybe some flurries for the eastern Arctic coast. And for Wednesday, areas of light snow possible over the southwest interior. Really mostly cloudy, areas of light snow across much of the western interior up to the north slope in the Arctic coast. Drier over the eastern and central interior again. Chance of rain or snow showers at times for the North Gulf Coast into south central Alaska, Prince William Sound. Not so much into the Copper River Basin. Whatever gets in there will be quite light. Aleutians, showers, passing showers, rain or snow. And winds still pretty gusty over the eastern Bering Sea. You could see gusts 40 miles an hour there from western St. Lawrence Island through the St. Matthew Island area and on down to the Alaska Peninsula. But winds will be light over the central and eastern interior areas. Look for some periods of light rain for the Panhandle. But winds really lightening up out west over the western Aleutians with high pressure and dry conditions, increasing possibly some sunshine. And then the outlook for Thursday, new front develops and pushes southward there. Cold front, bringing again another surge of cold air south to the Alaska Peninsula. Snowfall levels falling to near sea level out that way. And gusty winds near the Pribilofs eastward to just off the coast out of the northwest there. Strongest to the Alaska Peninsula. Pretty brisk for St. Lawrence Island and the Bering Strait, with a little breezy condition for the western Arctic coast. Otherwise, central interior and eastern interior of the state looking pretty good. Dry with some clearing throughout the day. That'll extend down into the northern southeast coast. Dry conditions there with mostly clear skies, but chance of rain with that low over the Queen Charlotte. That'll nudge enough moisture northward there to bring a chance of rain in over the southern southeast coast, possibly as far north as Wrangell, Petersburg, or Sitka to Port Alexander. Then a weak trough brings some leftover moisture, cloudy skies, chance of rain or snow showers. South central Alaska, mostly rain along the coastal areas of the Kenai Peninsula with some snow shower possibilities. Into the Denali Park area and the western Alaska Range area, but the Kuskokwim Valley, chance of rain or snow down to the south of that 989 millibar low. Otherwise, light winds, eastern Arctic coast may get grazed with a couple of flurries there with that trough off to the northeast, just may clip the coast, but if that happens, again, won't be too measurable. It'll be pretty insignificant, actually. And from there, going to low temperatures for tonight in the 30s to mid-40s for the Panhandle. Otherwise, Copper River Basin, lows in the mid-20s, 30 to 35 inland areas of southern Alaska. In the teens, west of the Alaska Range, Kuskokwim Valley, and in the 20s for Bristol Bay, mid-30s Kodiak Island. And the highs for Wednesday afternoon, 45 to 50 for the southeast coast, in the mid-40s southern Alaska, lower 40s Palmer and Anchorage, near 40 in the Susitna Valley, upper 30s Copper River Basin. And in the 30s for Bristol Bay, 25 to 30 for the Kuskokwim Valley, followed by lows 15 to 20 for the Kuskokwim Valley over there, in the upper 20s for the Susitna Valley, lower to mid-20s for the Copper River Basin, 30 to 35 Kenai Peninsula, near 40 for the Middleton Island zone, otherwise in the 30s for the Panhandle, and 25 to 30 for Bristol Bay, followed by highs in the 20s again for the Kuskokwim Valley, 35 to 42 or 3 there for the Kenai Peninsula, cooler staying in the 30s for the Susitna Manuska Valley, mid-30s Copper River Basin, and lower 40s to lower 50s across the southeast coast with Kodiak Island in the lower 40s. 5 to 15 for your lows from the Brooks Range on out to the Arctic coast, coldest over the western north slope, otherwise western interior 10 to 15, but in the mid-20s over toward Fairbanks. And then highs tomorrow, 20s to mid-30s, warmest around Fairbanks and over toward Delta. Otherwise in the 20s most everywhere else. And your lows on Thursday morning, again 5 to 15, Brooks Range out to the Arctic coast. A little cooler in the central interior, down into the lower 20s now for the Fairbanks area, mid-20s St. Lawrence Island. Highs in the 20s to lower 30s central interior, lower 20s Arctic coast and north slope. And your lows upper 20s for the Pribilofs, lower 30s for the Aleutians, upper 20s along the southwest coast. Highs mostly in the 30s, 35 to 40, except near freezing for the Pribilofs to St. Lawrence Island. And lows, mid-20s for the Pribilofs, lower 30s for the Aleutians, 30 to 35 for the Alaska Peninsula, followed by highs, 30s to lower 40s.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
For Wednesday morning, IFR, North Slope, Arctic coast, in through much of the central and west central interior, right on down into western Cook Inlet, IFR right out to the southwest coast, marginal VFR over the Bering Sea, Pribilofs, Nunivak Island, becoming some pretty good areas of VFR though for the Aleutians, and also Fognak Island, southern Cook Inlet, otherwise IFR, Kenai Peninsula, North Gulf Coast, northern Panhandle, also over toward the border. And for the afternoon, lots of IFR up north, all of the Arctic coast, North Slope, most of Brooks Range, down into the Kobuk, Koyukuk Valleys, central interior, right across the Yukon River. Also the Kuskokwim Valley, down to the Kuskokwim Delta, Togiak Bay, Dillingham IFR, IFR, eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range, and also the southern slopes. Looks like Talkeetna is right on up to the south side of the mountains IFR. And eastern North Gulf Coast into the range, IFR, northern Panhandle, no change, and best conditions out over the Aleutians. That continues into Thursday morning, Edakanatka, VFR. Eastern Kodiak Island, same thing, but a huge area of IFR up over the Arctic coast. And across the Brooks Range there, right on down to the Yukon River, the entire stretch of the river there in the IFR zone, Kuskokwim Valley as well. And then some IFR or VFR right along the western Alaska Range. and then back into the IFR, eastern slopes of the Western Range, Talkeetnas, northern Prince William Sound. Not too bad out over the Aleutians. And then for the afternoon, increasing VFR there, eastern interior, north of the Alaska Range, central interior areas, Fairbanks to maybe Tanana, north to about Beaver, and then IFR North Slope and portions of the Brooks Range, VFR for the eastern Aleutians, with marginal VFR elsewhere across the Alaska Peninsula, Bering Sea, and the western central Aleutian chain. And for passes, Anatuvik and Atigan both look IFR, either approach throughout the entire day. On Wednesday, Lake Clark and Merrill, IFR becoming marginal VFR. Rainy, IFR becomes marginal, trending better throughout the day for all three passes actually. Windy, marginal VFR, lowest conditions, southern approach, could be IFR at times there, but better out the north side. And for Isabel, IFR, lowest conditions, southern entrance, otherwise marginal VFR. Mentasta, marginal VFR to start, then becoming VFR, increasing VFR throughout the entire day into the afternoon. Tanita, IFR, possible, eastern entrance, otherwise marginal. And for Portage, IFR, eastern approach, otherwise marginal VFR. Chilkoot and White, IFR, pretty good bet throughout the entire day on Wednesday. And for the freezing levels, up along the southwest coast there, but near just west of the Pribilos, but well north of the Aleutians, cutting along the North Gulf Coast, and 2,000 feet over the eastern interior, up along the North Gulf Coast, 4,000 to 6,000 feet over the southern southeast coast. And for icing, areas of isolated moderate, rime or mixed, coming up along the North Gulf Coast, Panhandle, especially central and northern areas of the Panhandle, Alaska Peninsula, southeast Bering Sea, Bristol Bay. Pretty good in the interior. Then threat of some icing there up over the northeast interior, eastern Brooks Range to the Arctic coast, and even a less of a threat on the central and western Arctic coast. They're just kind of grazing the area with that moisture. And from there, going to the jet stream, showing south to southeast flow 75 to or 50 to 75 knots, actually 50 to 60 knots over the western interior. They're lighter over the central and east side. And then that southwest 95 knot jet cutting across the southern panhandle. Otherwise out to the west, winds looking west or west northwest, only 60 80 knots, the core of the jet south of the Aleutians. 9,000 feet, west-northwest slow across the Bering Sea, up 55 knots. They're coming across the northern Kamchatka Peninsula, but generally 40 to 45 knots, central southern Bering Sea, Alaska Peninsula. Takes a turn to the south, southerlies, 50 knots there, western Gulf of Alaska, east of Kodiak Island, 45 knots up and across Prince William Sound, Copper River Basin area. And 3,000 feet, northwest, 60 knots, right across the Alaska Peninsula, southerlies, 40 knots. Western Gulf of Alaska and west-northwest 35 to 40 knots over the central and eastern Bering Sea. Pretty light over the Panhandle, much of the central and northern interior. Turbulence, considerable moderate chop, Alaska Peninsula, Adak and Atka, otherwise light to isolated moderate chop there for the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound. Much of the Copper River Basin, southeast interior, and right along the southwest coast. After the break, I'll be back with the marine forecasts.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and today I'm privileged to introduce Dr. Uccellini, the Director of the United States National Weather Service. Welcome back to Alaska, sir.
Thank you, Dave. Glad to be here.
Thanks. Prior to being the leader of the National Weather Service, your work included an extensive look at snowstorms across the northeastern United States. These are the types of storms that can bring some of the country's largest cities to its knees. Tell me a little bit about your fascination with snow.
Well, as far back as I can remember, I've always been interested in weather, growing up as a kid on Long Island, New York, and was particularly fascinated by snowstorms, why they occurred. The distribution of snow was very varied across the entire region. The rain-snow line, all those things fascinated me right from the get-go. And I was interested in knowing how they worked, how the forecast worked, or more often than not, didn't work one way or the other. And that drove me, that interest continued to build and drove me through high school right into college, wanting to be a meteorologist.
Okay, that's a fascinating story, and I think every meteorologist has a weather story like that in some way. Right. Due to Alaska's size and proximity to the North Pole, sometimes it's difficult to detect and analyze the weather patterns over Alaska. What's the National Weather Service doing to improve that weather detection?
Well, observations in this type of environment is a big challenge, whether it's from space or from what we call in situ observations from the ground or within the systems. Clearly, satellites have been playing an increasing role in providing the big picture, not only from a visual sense in what you see is occurring, but also from providing the data for numerical models that then are used to actually predict the weather. Alaska is actually pretty well positioned with respect to polar orbiting satellites, since you get a faster return of those satellites over your particular area. And in fact, the polar satellite system is the backbone for the observations that we use in our models, especially our global models, and they're particularly important for observing weather features that affect Alaska.
Alaskans live and die by the weather every day, and one of the strategic goals of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the National Weather Service is to develop a more weather-ready nation. What does it mean for Alaskans to be weather-ready?
Well, the strategic outcome is based on people being ready, responsive, and therefore resilient to the increasing threats to extreme weather events. Those threats are related to not only the nature of the events, but the fact that we're becoming more vulnerable to them as we have more people, more infrastructure that could be affected by these events. So we have to ensure that the observations we make for situational awareness, the forecasts we make for people to take the proper responses, are connected to people's actions, the response to these events, so that they will be more resilient to what's facing them. There are examples with respect to hurricanes. More people living along the coastline takes longer to evacuate. We have to make better forecasts with longer lead times, but we also have to communicate the threat so people will actually take action to avoid those storms. Up here you have, as in other parts of the United States, an increasing threat related to fire. As there are more people living in fire-prone areas, we have to ensure that our forecasts are good, that we don't have false alarms that make people not react to the forecast when in fact they should. But we also have to be able to communicate the threat and make sure that we're working with the partners in the emergency management community so that communities and right down to individuals will actually take the proper responses in the face of these events. So that's the strategic goal. There are a lot of challenges for us in terms of improving forecasts, but also improving our communication skills and linking with the emergency management communities that are actually out there trying to protect lives and mitigate property loss.
So a huge partnership effort going forward.
That's one of the important keys for the success of meeting the strategic goal.
Okay. One of the things you're talking about was understanding the weather information we're getting back from the computers, weather modeling, and you did a lot of work with that in some of your prior positions with the Environmental Prediction Center there, the National Center for Environmental Prediction. What can you tell us about recent improvements in that weather modeling? And you were using the polar orbiters as kind of a source of information that started that process.
Well, first of all, we have to recognize that everything you see, you read and hear about weather, climate, or ocean forecasts are all driven by numerical models. Now, it really has been the revolution in our forecast process in the last part of the 20th century. The success of that numerical enterprise is based on three factors: big computers, global data, not just local data, but you have to have a global data set, and then the models themselves, the science that's behind the models and in running the models in an operational mode. So we're working to improve all three of those components. We upgraded our computers last year. We're going through another upgrade even as I speak. We'll be upgrading from 200 trillion calculations per second to 700 trillion calculations per second by January of 2015. This increase in the computer will allow us to run what we call Earth system models. It's not just the atmosphere, it's the atmosphere, ocean, ice, which is obviously very important up here, and land models that are all coupled together
Okay.
at higher resolution. So you need the big computers, you need the science that allows us to run these models and run them in a parallel mode, and that they're coupled so that the ocean effects could affect the atmosphere and vice versa, as an example. And then the global observations are absolutely critical, and over the last 20, 30 years they've become more dependent upon the satellite systems, and especially the polar orbiting satellites, which help drive the observations needed for those models, whether they be atmospheric observations, land, ice observations. We're deriving more and more of that from satellites now that feed into these models and produce forecasts with extended lead times. Now out, for extreme events especially, we're seeing much improved forecast out in the 4, 5, 6, 7, and even 8-day range, which gets us back to Weather Ready Nation, because if you're going to get ready for a storm event, you want those consistent forecasts approaching that event from day 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, so you can take the actions several days in advance that can help mitigate the property loss and protect your livelihood.
Okay, all part of the mission of protecting life and property. Dr. Uccellini, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and speaking to Alaskans and sharing how the National Weather Service is working for Alaska and the nation. Wish you safe travels around the 49th. Enjoy your time here, sir. And for Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at today's sea ice analysis. Pretty well solid eastern Beaufort Sea coast. Some thinner ice off the coast there of the central Arctic coast, and then the area of open water over the southern Chukchi Sea slowly continuing to drop south a little bit. And moving on to coastal water forecasts for the Panhandle, south coast west-southwest tomorrow 15 to 20 knots. North coast southwest 25 knots with seas 11 feet. Lincoln Island Glacier Bay south winds 25 knots. And winds diminish as you head south there over the inner waters with 20 knots in the forecast for Stevens Passage. Clarence Strait south winds 15 knots. For Thursday, small craft advisories on the south coast. Southeast winds 25 to 30 knots. Lighter up north, east-southeast breeze at 15 knots for the north coast. Seas at about 8 feet. Northwest 20, Lynn Canal, otherwise Stevens Passage, looking at a north wind at 10. Clarence Strait south at 15. Prince William Sound and Cook Inlet tomorrow. Southerly winds 20 knots, seas running 3 to 5 feet. Small craft advisories for the North Gulf Coast. Southwest winds 25 knots. Barren Islands, small craft advisories, south winds 25 knots. And Kamishak Bay, southwest at 15. And for our Thursday, small craft advisories, Prince William Sound, east 25, seas 4 feet, south 25 for the eastern North Gulf Coast. Western North Gulf Coast, Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, all pretty good. Southwest at 15 with seas 4 to 9 feet. Kodiak Island tomorrow, southerly winds 20 to 25 knots, seas 4 to 10 feet. Gale warnings for the Alaska Peninsula, west winds 35 to 40 knots, northeast 20 for Bristol Bay, and southwest 30 knots that connect to Castle Cape. And for Thursday, gale warnings for the Alaska Peninsula, northwest 35 knots, seas up to 20 feet on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula. Small craft advisories for Bristol Bay and southwest of Kodiak, 25 knot winds out of the west in those locations. Otherwise, Kodiak Island itself, southwest 15 to 20 knots. Fox Islands, Unalaska Island, some gale warnings. Northwest 30 to 35 knots. Small craft advisories for Runmack Island for west-northwest 25 to 30 knots. About the same for Adak and Atka. Northwest winds 25 knots for Kiska, Shimia, and Attu. And for Thursday, lighter winds out west, west 15 from Shimia to Kiska Island, Amchitka Island, west at about 20. Back into the small craft advisories, Adak and Atka, northwest or west-northwest 25 to 30 knots. And gale warnings for Unalaska Island, northwest winds 35 knots, seas 11 to 19 feet. Winds just a little lighter there for Runmack Island. Southwest coast, west-northwest 25 to 30 knots, strong south of Nunivak Island tomorrow. Otherwise, in northern Bering Sea, St. Matthew Island looking at northwest winds 40 knots. and 30-knot northwest winds for the Pribilof Islands. Gale warnings for St. Lawrence Island. North winds 35 knots. And for Thursday, north at 30 for St. Lawrence Island. Gale warnings on the Yukon Delta coast, and the Pribilofs for northwest winds at 35 knots. Otherwise, northwest 30 knots for the Kuskokwim Delta coastline and the northern Bering Sea around St. Matthew Island. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, east-northeast 15 to 20 knots tomorrow. North at about 20 on the central coast. Small craft advisories, western Arctic coast north 25 knots and 30-knot northerlies from Cape Beaufort to Wales. Northeast 25, still small craft advisories, Wales to Cape Beaufort for northeast 25. Northeast 20 on the western Arctic coast, central coast north at about 20, and then north-northwest 15 to 20 knots, eastern Beaufort Sea coastline. For tonight, look for a few flurries up, possibly on the eastern Arctic coast. Otherwise dry in the interior, some lingering snow showers there, Yukon Flats into the 40-mile country. Otherwise dry for the central Tanana Valley into the Copper River Basin. Chance of rain, Panhandle, chance of rain and snow North Gulf Coast, southern Cook Inlet. And gusty winds with rain and snow showers for the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians. That holds through tomorrow. Chance of snow mainly western Alaska and the north. But amounts quite light, again, like today, less than an inch. Most areas maybe a little bit more in the Alaska Peninsula. Stays unsettled for the Panhandle. Another cold front with cold air again. Gusty winds, possibly as high as 50 miles an hour for the Alaska Peninsula and the southwest coast. Eastern interior, though, looking pretty good. Central areas, Tanana Valley, Yukon Flats, dry, maybe some sunshine into the northern Panhandle, but looks wet and unsettled farther to the south.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.